Blizzard, in so many ways, and I almost want to say objectively so, have the worst product. There are better MMOs than World of Warcraft you could play. For me, that's Final Fantasy. There are better ARPGs. All of their games, there are better alternatives for them. But they still, they're floating and they're doing well in a lot of ways. Why? Well, for a lot of us, it's because of the goodwill we've built up, the nostalgia we have for the games, um, and the memories we have playing them. And that's not necessarily rational. It's a feeling, but feelings cause decision making purchases. And so they're able to maintain a player base, and they're at least able, and this has been their strategy for a couple expansions now. They're at least able to build enough hype to then, uh, flashbang all of their old players just long enough to get them to impulse. This is what happened to me. I'm speaking from my own personal experience here. To impulsively buy Shadowlands or impulsively buy the new expansion, and then whether or not they play it or not long term, who cares? We got their money. And what they do furthermore is they're like, you know what else we can do to make a lot of money? Tie in-game rewards to a 6-month sub. So if they subscribe for 6 months, they get in-game rewards. And, flashbang them just long enough that they impulsively buy that 6 months. Now they bought the expansion and we got 6 months of them. Even if they only play 2 weeks, who the fuck cares? We got their money. Who the fuck cares? I am speaking from personal experience. That's what happened with Shadowlands. I had no interest in playing that game. I did not like BFA, but then Shadowlands came out and it became the most purchased game of PC history up until Cyberpunk. And all my friends were playing it, and all the streamers I like to watch were playing it. And I had a lapse in judgment. And you know what I said? I said, fuck it. It looks decent. Everyone's saying it's good. I'm gonna buy Shadowlands. I know Blizzard has been dropping the ball for the past several expansions, but this is different, right? Right? Wrong. And that's what people said because it's the honeymoon phase. But now I've been through this cycle enough times that now I could see the cycle. That's why now with Dragonflight, I'm like, no, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I want to show you guys a video. I want to show you guys a video about this that Kevin Jordan did. I talk a lot about Kevin Jordan, but you guys, I have never done a react to any of his videos or anything like that.
Reddit. And I think it offers some interesting insight,
Such a quiet
potentially,
video. I'm slamming my volume. I hope it's good.
into what's been going on with WoW across its history. And first of all, disclaimer, I don't know how accurate these are, but there's two potential things we can look at here in this document or in this graph. One is the location of the points, which we can talk about, and the relationship between the data points, which I think can also be potentially correct and lends insight into what's been going on with WoW. So let's dive right in. So the first thing I notice is, in general, the decline of the game subscriptions over time in a pretty steady downward angle. That can certainly be attributed to just age of the game.
In case anyone is just listening and not able to watch, Kevin Jordan is now looking at a graph, and player numbers were going up from vanilla all the way up to Wrath, and then they plateau at Wrath, and then they start going down from Kata all the way till current day. However, his chart stops at BFA because he made this video 3 years ago.
The game either fails to retain people over a long time, or and potentially it fails to convert new players into longtime players to sort of backfill for the people that are leaving the game. Because at this point, not only was it retaining existing players, but it was also adding new players that had caught the bug.
What's interesting hearing this from Kevin Jordan is Kevin Jordan was working on the game from its inception at vanilla, and he left the company at Wrath. So he only worked on the game during its uprising, and the moment he left, it started going downhill. That probably allows him to feel kind of vindicated. And there is a little bit of drama between Kevin and Ian. Now, Ian Hazakostas came into the company around the time that Kevin was leaving, but there was a little bit of interlap between them. And oftentimes on Kevin's Twitch streams, he talks about how, uh, you know, uh, Ian doesn't exactly learn from his mistakes, and how I tried to get him to understand a couple concepts, but he just wanted to do things his own way.
Of the WoW experience and continue to play um, for as long as some of the early adopters had played. So there's two kind of forces at work, and I believe one of the things that WoW has gotten worse at is attracting and keeping new players. I think the new player experience has gotten worse and has failed to capture that new player for the long term.
Yeah, and we talked about that on stream yesterday. Immediately when I pulled up the stream of the announcement, what some of the buzzwords I heard were things like we're going to return to having an Azerothian experience. We're not going to do the Shadowlands stuff that you guys aren't used to. We're going to take the people who are used to playing the game from the past, who are used to, exploring the lands of Azeroth, and we're going to try to capitalize on your nostalgia, and we're going to try to present the game in such a way where you think it's a return to form, even though it might not be. And that also is something they did in Shadowlands because it happened to me. They said in the Shadowlands announcement, straight up, we're going to create a situation where you're going to have a base class, and then each spec just becomes a slight spin-off off of your base class, where, let's say, if you're a mage and you want to spec into fire, you're still going to have Frostbolt. And um, if you spec into Frost, you're still going to have Firebolt. And so me, someone who used to play the game as a kid, heard that and listened in and thought to myself, oh, okay, so they're going to make the game good like when I was a kid. But then I subscribed to Shadowlands, and although they weren't lying, it certainly wasn't what they implied. All the specs were still rather different from each other. And not only that, it seemed like it was only done as a marketing stunt, because very rarely as a fire mage did you ever use Frostbolt, and vice versa. So, and this definitely applied to warriors, because warriors, they made Shield Bash universal. To use Shield Bash, you need to have a shield. If you're spec'd into Fury and you're holding two-handed weapons, how the fuck are you gonna use Shield Bash? You see what I'm saying? Like, it didn't even make sense from a game design perspective.
um, which is something it was much better at in vanilla BC and in Wrath even. But and there are a number of reasons why, which I've spoken about quite a bit on my channel, on my Twitch channel. But yeah, let's sideline that for now and look at some of these later data points. So the big thing I think is there's two things we can analyze. We can analyze the sub numbers themselves to say, well, it looks like Miss Pandaria did not attract as many people as Cataclysm did.
I'm gonna speed this up just a little bit. Kevin, is taking his time a little bit in his speech, so I'm gonna speed this up to 1.3. I hope that's okay with everyone.
Right? Like if you look at the Cataclysm sub numbers, which were still on par with Wrath, these are people that continued to play through Wrath and at
And I'm a slow talker too, so I'm not trying to shit on Kevin.
the launch of Cataclysm. And then people started canceling subs, and the backfill wasn't enough to keep those numbers high. And so by the time Miss Pandaria came out, people were unhappy with Kata, essentially, and not interested in Miss Pandaria to check it out to see if changes had been made. So not only did we lose people, but we lost. When I say we, I was gone by then, so they lost people, and the promise wasn't even there, right? The promise of improvements and fundamental changes to the game wasn't enough to bring them back to take a look, right? Because when I look at these data points, I look at when it launches, like if you look at Legion here, and then I look at the lowest point before the next expansion came out. So this is the promise. These are the true believers that believe the game has an opportunity to become the game that they love again, and they want to believe that the new expansion is moving the game in the right direction, right? So they all sign up, they all check it out. And this is coming in at 10 million, but there's also in Warlords, this was also 10 million, and in Mists, it was also 10 million. So throughout this entire point right here, you can see 10 million people essentially believe that the game still has promise, and they want to believe, they're desperate to believe that the game's latest X-Pack or expansion can deliver on that potential, can deliver on that promise, so that they can start playing the game that they've loved for a while again. And then the difference between that and the lowest point is essentially what have they achieved in terms of realizing that potential. This is where they believe, and this is what reality is for a lot of people, right? So a lot of people drop off between believing and desperately hoping and desiring, and then what in reality is what the game has actually done for them.
And that's exactly what I meant earlier when I said one thing that Blizzard is still really good at is hype marketing. They've always been good marketers. Their cinematics have always been some of the best cinematics in the industry, especially back in 2004 when the vanilla cinematic came out. Do you guys remember that? When the vanilla cinematic came out? That was way ahead of its league. And so they build the hype, and then they try to, that's why I said they flashbang people, try to get as many people in as they can, and then whether or not the game is good, who cares? I got your money already. We'll just do it again next time. Next expansion in 2 years, boys. Let's do the same thing again.
Um, and so, back in the day, right, not only was the game still attracting new customers and pulling them in to the experience, it was also delivering on the promise and the potential of the game. So throughout here, the potential was still being strived for, and still they were still achieving the potential. And then afterwards, after Cataclysm, I mean, this to me, right, these three data points are so telling, because look how many people still believed by Legion, even after they had been burned by MOP, because you'll see the downward swing, had been believing again, and then burned by Warlords, and then believing again, and then burned by Legion, right? And it wasn't until after 3 expansions, several years of failing to meet the potential, like in Mists, this many people believed, man, they can't do it, or they're not doing it. Warlords, they signed up again, man, they're not doing it, they're not getting it done. Legion, I still believe, bang, even bigger group have decided nope. But you don't actually see the believers start to take a hit until BFA.
Now we have more data, right? This is a 3-year-old video now. We have more data. What isn't on this chart is Shadowlands. Shadowlands was the highest grossing PC game of all time for a few weeks until Cyberpunk came out. And when that happened, what that implies then is the believers skyrocketed back up. Now, why is that? The reason I think that is because they're still trying to leverage the goodwill that they built from the past. And let me put on my tinfoil hat here. This is a tinfoil hat theory that I'm about to say. You know how with the Shadowlands cinematic, you have Sylvanas and she walks into Icecrown? Who is the most iconic character in the whole Warcraft universe? It's the Lich King. It's Arthas. And they knew that, and I think that's a big reason why they tried to tie the Lich King into the cinematic of Shadowlands, because they knew that if we tie exactly Arthas, if we tied Arthas into this, all of the people are going to associate this with Wrath. And that's when they had their highest player count, during Wrath, and before it plateaued, right? And so it's through these cheap tactics that they're using to, build that hype back up. It's exactly what they're doing now when they're saying we're going to return to an Azerothian experience. We're going to go back to Azeroth. We're going to do all the shit that we used to do. It's the same fucking concept. It's the same fucking concept. And so what ended up happening with Shadowlands, of course, all of us started expecting, okay, we're going to see Arthas, and then maybe we're going to, have more closure with Arthas, the character. And what did we fucking get? We waited all the way until 9.2, and we got a little wisp that was supposed to be a fracture of his spirit, and Sylvanas saying, "Fly away, little Arthas, fly away," and that was it. It's a complete debate.
And BFA, assuming this data point is correct, right? You've lost 3.5 million people essentially from the believer group, right? And then of course, this number even hits, but not as bad, right? And it's still young because we can't see the next expansion yet, but this is the sort of the same angle as the last three expansions: belief to disbelief, right? Belief to disbelief. And in MOP, it wasn't as bad. So Mists, the angle wasn't as sharp, and you can see sort of the what looked like the expansion points as things start to go up and then back down and then back up. It's probably not the expansion points, but the patch points that are like full of promise again. Bring it out and then nope, and then back up a little bit, and then BFA launches, huge belief again, and then nope. Right, they get in there and see it. So they're failing to retain essentially belief. Like, I don't believe that the decline here has to do with running out of content. I don't think people necessarily.
Well, he doesn't have the new data because in the new patches, in the new expansions, not Shadowlands was very scarce on content. So it's interesting to see this 3-year-old video and see kind of how things have progressed since he made this video.
Rip through the content this fast and then get tired of the game and unsub and wait for the next. Like, I think it's a combination of some people running out of content and some people not enjoying the content that they're actually doing, right? But that's another thing to consider when it comes to what is Blizzard's job in terms of retaining people from one X pack to the next. It's to make enough content and quality content that keeps people intrigued for as long.
Well, now it's not even that anymore because so long as you tie in a mount with a 6-month sub and you build enough hype for people to buy the expansion, you now have their money for a sub in 6 months. Why would you need content? Who cares? Just make sure you do it again next year or the year after that.
As long as possible before the next X pack. And I think they're failing on both counts. But this is the most telling one right here to me, because the belief was still strong for this 5-year period, right, between 2012 and 2017, where people were like, they could turn it around, and then BFA launches, and it's like, this is a really sharp decline in the number of people that believe that WoW can be turned around. And I think now we're at that crossroads where it's like they've lost a lot of trust, and they're going to have to make big steps. They're going to have to do big things in the right direction to get.
So I know you guys aren't on Twitter because you're all boomers like me, but I have to be on Twitter because I make content. And when I was on Twitter this morning, kind of scrolling through, all of the tweets I saw from a bunch of people, WoW is saved, WoW is back, oh my God, holy shit, I missed WoW. Finally, we have our WoW back. It's the same motherfucking cycle they did with Shadowlands, man. They like, how do you guys think Dragonflight is going to perform? I think it's going to do well. A lot of people are going to buy Dragonflight. A lot of people are going to buy 6-month subs. A lot of people are going to play it and for the first few weeks say it's fucking amazing. And then once they have said it's fucking amazing, what's that going to do? It's going to rope in their friends because, everyone's getting the positive feedback. So the people who are more skeptical, who decide, oh no, I'm going to wait and see what happens, they see all of their friends saying it's good, so then they play. But the only reason that their friends are saying it's good is because they're still in the honeymoon phase. And then the honeymoon phase finishes a month and a half later. And then everyone's back to saying, wow, it's shit. It's the cycle that's happened the past several expansions. I'll read your guys' chat in a second. I just want to make sure I get through the video, and then I'll read all of chat.
These belief numbers back up. So, and this is an interesting point for games in general that do sequels and whatnot. Like, I'll reference Diablo 3 here. Diablo 3 was always going to be successful from a unit sold standpoint because Diablo 2 was such a huge success. But Diablo 3 made people unhappy. Quite a few people were unhappy with Diablo 3, and now that puts a lot of pressure on Diablo 4 to be better, because you won't get that auto buy-in that you got in with Diablo 3 based on the success of Diablo 2 and the enjoyment of Diablo 2. So it was something we always talked about, where it's like, yep, Diablo 3 is pretty much guaranteed to be good in terms of sales, but you're going to potentially destroy sales of Diablo 4 if you put out a product that's not very good, right? So
How do you guys think Diablo 4 is going to be? I actually have, I'm going to be completely honest. I have a little bit of hope for Diablo 4 just because I think that team is such a different team than the WoW team. And, I've, kept up with Diablo 4 a little bit. And I think that Blizzard did a rather good job with the Diablo 2 Resurrected release, especially when you compare that to Warcraft 3 Reforged. And so for these reasons, I think Diablo 3 may be maybe, I'm not saying, it's a high chance, but there is a chance that it might be good. I definitely have more hope for D4 than I do for Dragonflight. That's for sure.
So, and this sort of shows me for the MMO, like, wow, how long you can actually disappoint people, right? Which I think is really interesting. So anyway, that's my brief analysis of what these numbers show me, and sort of hopefully, the devs are thinking about these kinds of things when they work on the next expansion, but they should be aware that they've lost a lot of faith and a lot of trust based on these points here. And again, as always, the ball's in their court to re-earn it, but we shall see. I do think Blizzard and WoW are at a real crossroads right now. I think the message has been received and is being received even more and more loudly, that people are disappointed and unhappy with quite a few of the things they've done. And
you guys should see the reaction Kevin does to hearing that they were going to put boosts in TBC, because that's his baby. That's his love child. That's his project. Let me see if I can find it. Reacts to TBC boosts. Poor guy, man. His words, not mine. Quote unquote. They massacred my baby. Let me see if I could find it. I think it's this video right here.
There's a lot of my friends, for example, who maybe didn't really play Classic when it first came out, right? And so now they're behind. And they're interested in playing the Burning Crusade. This was, for a lot of people, their favorite expansion that we've done. We want to make sure that those people are served too. And one of the ways we could do that is provide a boost to people who are interested in coming back, that maybe aren't interested in doing the classic WoW experience, but really want to hop right into Outland as quickly as possible.
Yeah, so the team, we spent quite a bit of time discussing it because we want to make sure we respect the time of the people that have been playing Classic for 2 years. But also, we want people to be able to enjoy Burning Crusade if they loved it the first time and maybe missed Classic. So we are going to offer a level 58 boost for purchase, but it does come with some restrictions. So it's going to be one per account.
Dude.
It's not going to be usable on Blood Elf or Draenei. It'll have some dungeon blues. It'll have level 40 mount skill, no professions. It's the basics, basically your Outland starting kit.
That's cool. That's a really great way to jump into the game. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I like that.
I'll be looking forward to that.